Sunday, CF-18 Hornets conducted Canada's first combat airstrike on ISIL targets. The 4 targets were located near a dam west of Fallujah and consisted of heavy engineering equipment and vehicles.
Lieutenant General Jonathan Vance gives more details about what Canadian fighter jets hit in Iraq. Let me show you the video. This is it on Sunday. 2 CF-18 fighter jets hit targets near Fallujah. That's about 71 kilometers west of Baghdad. You'll probably remember that name from the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Bombs hit 5 bulldozers and a dump truck being used by ISIS apparently to divert water from the river, creating flooding in communities upstream. No civilian casualties were reported. In total, Canadian planes have now flown 27 sorties in Iraq so far. That includes 5 trips out by the Aurora surveillance plane, which, according to General Vance, was instrumental in another coalition strike that destroyed a key ISIS base. How are Canadian targets being chosen? How significant are they in the fight against ISIS? And then there's a question of the cost. What is it costing Canadians to do these missions? Joining me now, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Defence Minister, James Bezan, the Defence Critic for the NDP, Jack Harris, and the Liberal Defence Critic, Joyce Murray. James Bezan, I'll start with you. 5 bulldozers and a dump truck, which is what the Canadian forces have destroyed so far. Why are these significant targets in your view? Is that basically what Canada will be hitting?
No, there's going to be all sorts of targets to be hit, but these were critical assets for ISIL. They were using this to build a dam and as well as defense fortresses to protect ISIL positions. They were backing up the Euphrates River, and that was flooding out local populations as well as denying water to those downriver towards Fallujah and Baghdad. So that's why it's important that they were taken out. And you know, combat engineering is one of the most critical assets that any military has, and so it was important to target them.
Okay, Jack Harris and Joyce Murray, I mean, this is the first information we've had, what they're hitting and what they're contributing to this mission. What do you make of this, Jack Harris?
Well, today, you know, there was 2 briefings at the same time. One was supposedly a technical briefing for the media, who obviously couldn't then come to the Defence Committee to hear a briefing that we got from some other people. And I don't know why that was done. It kept the media away from the Defence Committee. The information they got was different from what we got. We didn't see any pictures of bulldozers. There was some suggestion that these were not civilians. I don't know who was running the bulldozers, whether they were civilians or not. So I'm not sure we're getting precise kind of information about this, but it was good to hear at least some information. They gave a good argument as to why this was a strategic target, so we understand a little more than what we were hearing from the Americans about the bulldozers and dump trucks. So we did get some information today, but we were denied information about costs, for example. We were in fact told there was no estimates been prepared, but that's not what General Lawson told the media on October 17th. So we're still not getting full disclosure here, and so we got a sort of shadow box with information that's being given out in dribs and drabs.
Fair enough. We'll get back to the cost issue with Mr. Bezan, but let me go to Joyce Murray. What's your reaction now that we've got some information about what this mission is accomplishing?
Well, Evan, I think we were all relieved at hearing of the kind of precautions to keep our armed force members safe and to try and avoid civilian casualties. There was a Conservative member that said, why was this news about the Canadian airstrikes on U.S. television days before we heard about it here? So what's going on? And so I asked the committee to consider having weekly updates that would be open to all parliamentarians so that we have a good sense of what's going on.
Mr. Bezan, let's talk about that. Could there be weekly updates, and what about the cost? I mean, obviously Canadians are going to wonder. They look at Libya, about $360 million for that mission. When are we going to get a sense of what it costs and maybe regular updates on the mission?
Look, we've said right from the beginning that there's going to be full accountability and disclosure here. We want to make sure that the information that we're sharing is accurate. And so in correlation to what Joyce just commented on, we have to remember that what was reported on the Centricom's website yesterday down in Tampa Bay was very high level, not a lot of details. What we released today was all the details, exactly why that target was hit. I think General Vance did a great job in his technical briefing today, as well as General Hood did at committee, telling us exactly why those targets that were selected. And as we said right from the beginning, that we will have this mission completely costed out, that we will report back through normal parliamentary processes so that Canadians and parliamentarians are informed of what this engagement is costing the taxpayer.
General Vance basically, by the way, Jack Harris, he did say that they confirmed that ISIS were driving those bulldozers. I guess the question, General Vance also said ground forces will be needed. I'll start with you, Mr. Harrison, real quick. Do any of you have concerns about just how effective now these sorties are going to be, given the fact that we now know ground forces are going to be needed? Everyone says it's Iraqi ground forces. Reports out of Syria, where Americans have backed another Free Syrian Army, they got routed by a different group that Americans have targeted called Jabhat al-Nusra. What concerns do you have now about how this is going to unfold, Jack Harris?
Well, it's a bit disconcerting to hear a lot of talk about that from our generals and our Prime Minister, because I don't know where that's going to lead us. We know that from what you just said, what's going on in Syria, there's a real quagmire in terms of who's who and who's fighting who and who's supporting who. But we also know that the Iraqi government has said quite clearly that they don't want foreign fighters of any kind on their territory. So, the question then becomes is how effective ultimately the airstrikes are going to be. I know that they can have some effect now, particularly if there's a strategic target that's available. But the thought from the beginning was that they were going to run out of targets very soon. They only have 60 or 70 tanks. They've only got so many positions that they're defending. So what are these aircraft going to be doing for the next 6 months, because they're committed to being there?
Mr. Bezan and then Joyce Murray.
Yeah.
Joyce Murray, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to tie this back into the question that you had about costs, because we are guessing that this first 6-month mission is some $350 million. Of course, Australia's Prime Minister is openly saying what their prediction is or what their estimate is, and I have no idea why the Canadian government can't do that as well. But should there be an extension of this mission, we would be looking at perhaps $700 million up to who knows how much. And so there was a very legitimate question that both I asked and Jack asked about what other things can't we be doing with the armed forces if the costs escalate like that. And I can tell you, I was very disappointed that Mr. Bezan tried to shut down that line of questioning through points of order.
So Mr. Bezan, just jump in on that.
Well, just that, General Hood isn't the person to be answering questions on budgetary processes within D&D. We didn't have the chief financial officer there from D&D to provide that information. I think it was an unfair questioning by both Jack and Joyce, and that's why I interceded.
Yeah.
Well, let's just get back to the fact that what Jack had actually said about we're going to run out of targets. That's making the assumption that the ISIL military is a static entity. We know that they're continuing to be equipped, they're very well resourced and funded, and they're still accessing all sorts of armaments around the globe to build up their army. And we have to make sure that we can keep them under the ground like they are right now, moving in smaller packages. That means that there's actually more targets to hit than fewer. And if there was no air combat role right now by any of the coalition partners, they would have Baghdad today. So we have to be out there and operative and support the Iraqi security forces on the ground. And as Jack said, and as General Hood had mentioned, and Prime Minister Harper said yesterday, there is no way that this is going to be won strictly with an aerial campaign. But the Iraqi security forces want to win this one on their own, and they're going to be responsible for all the boots on the ground.
Unfortunately, I've got to leave it there. James Bezan, Jack Harris, Joyce Murray, good to have all of you. There'll be lots and lots of talk about this in the days and weeks to come. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.